Welcome once again to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgili, Hispanic Public Information Officer for Montgomery County Government. And joining us today is Dr. Keisha Davis, our Health Officer, as well as Mr. Sean O'Donnell, also from the Department of Health and Human Services. Dr. Earl Stoddard, who's Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. And we do have a special guest today, Ms. Sylvia Taylor, Vice President for Novavax, which company headquartered in Gaithersburg that has been making headlines this week. Thank you for joining us, Mr. County Executive. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Actually, where I am, it's good morning. And thank you all for joining me. Just in case you're wondering, I'm conducting this briefing from San Francisco today. I came out for a couple of days of vacation, and I'm doing 2 days of touring some solid waste recovery facilities out here. California's often seen as being on the cutting edge of programs friendly to the environment, and they're doing things in the world of recycling and waste recovery that we do not do in Montgomery County. And we have fallen far behind state of the art in what most, well, I won't say most yet, but what more jurisdictions are doing to try to make better use of their waste stream and to monetize as much of it as possible. So I'm going to spend a couple of days visiting facilities out here since I'm already here. We're planning to shut down the county incinerator, but in order to do that, we have to find better solutions for dealing with trash. And we're doing this as soon as possible. There are a lot of other jurisdictions, and I've been talking to a few of them. So this is just part of the work that we've been doing in order to come up with a plan so we can move forward on closing the incinerator and having a more sustainable and sensible program regarding our solid waste disposal. Other news of the week, we just added another vaccine option for the fall COVID vaccines. This comes out of the, hold on a second, my screen did a terrible jump. This comes out of Novavax, and we heard, some good news yesterday. The Food and Drug Administration went forward and approved their immunization to prevent COVID-19 in people 12 and older. This is good news for them, but it's good news for us as well. Last month, I had an opportunity, along with a larger group that included several council members, to visit Novavax headquarters in Gaithersburg and meet with their CEO, John Jacobs, and other members of the leadership team. We also toured labs and met some of the employees who are working in R&D and quality control and operations there. The thing about the Novavax vaccine, it's the only protein-based non-mRNA COVID vaccine option in the United States. And I think, a lot of you heard, during all the biggest noises about COVID, that there are some people who didn't want to take mRNA vaccines. It wasn't the normal way vaccines were developed, and they wanted a vaccine that was produced in the traditional way. So this is the traditional way of producing a vaccine. And hopefully that this group of people who've been holding out from getting vaccinated because they didn't like the other vaccines will come forward and take these vaccines. I don't agree with their reasoning. I think they were fundamentally wrong. But the important thing now is this gives that group the opportunity to get a vaccine that they otherwise wouldn't have taken. And the more people that are vaccinated, the better it is for all of us. So however people arrive at doing the right thing, whether it's through an mRNA vaccine or a protein-based vaccine, the important thing is you get vaccinated, you keep yourself safe, and you keep the people around you safe. I'm glad to have Sylvia Taylor here. She's Executive Vice President and Chief Corporate Affairs and Advocacy Officer for Novavax, and she's going to join us today just to share some information. So Sylvia, thank you for joining, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, County Executive Elrich, for having me today. It's very gracious of you to give me this time. We are so excited about the authorization of our COVID-19 vaccine yesterday. I'll talk about that in a moment. But first of all, County Executive, I want to commend you for your leadership in Montgomery County. We are so proud to be housed here in Montgomery County, Maryland. And we have enjoyed so much support from you and the entire team of Montgomery County. And, you know, I've been impressed, as I told you when I saw you a few weeks ago at our lab tour and site visit, how well you understand the science and follow it. And I continue to be impressed with that today. You know, I think what's really important, as you mentioned, is that with the Novavax vaccine authorization yesterday, this is the first and only protein-based non-mRNA vaccine that's going to be offered in the United States and most parts of the world. And it comes right out of your backyard. All of our backyard in Montgomery County. So we're so thrilled about that. I think to add a little bit more context, you know, yesterday we got the authorization, the emergency use authorization for the vaccine here in the United States. We also, at the same time, simultaneously got a recommendation from the CDC that will allow eventually the utilization of this vaccine. So that was really significant to be able to say we were authorized and then in the same day were recommended for use. You know, I think what's really important right now is, as you said, Mark, COVID-19 is not over. I know we're fatigued thinking about it, talking about it, but the fact remains that hospitalizations are still on the rise right now. I would be surprised if everybody on this call doesn't know at least one person or more in their circle who is getting COVID-19. And so, you know, the threat remains, it is very serious. And we know that vaccination is the #1 preventable way to make sure we're not contracting COVID-19 for ourselves, but also spreading it in the community and to our loved ones. So we know that vaccination isn't only important for keeping ourselves safe, but keeping our community safe. That's incredibly important. So the headlines here for us are that in September, we got millions of doses of our vaccine into the United States ready for yesterday's authorization. So where do we go next? Our next step is, now that we're authorized and we have the recommendation from the CDC, we begin shipping in a matter of days. As soon as FDA releases batches, we begin shipping out to thousands of customers across the country. You know, we have signed contracts already with many retail pharmacies, national retail pharmacies, including CVS and Rite Aid. We'll be announcing many more in the week to come. We're also going to be available at thousands of healthcare provider offices and through Vaccines for Children, and very importantly, through the Bridge Access Program that the administration has spearheaded to make sure that nobody is left behind and that everybody has access to vaccines for COVID-19, especially if they're under or uninsured. So I am happy with that to take any questions that you all have about the vaccine, about the rollout, because there's lots to talk about, and I want to be sure I give you some time to take your questions.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Members of the media, I see Suzanne Pollack already has her hand up. My MC Media, good afternoon, Suzanne. You have questions about this topic?
Good afternoon, thanks. I was just wondering if you're going to be doing a advertising campaign or anything, because most people immediately think of the 2 vaccines that have been around for a couple of years. And I was just wondering how you plan to get your name out or what you plan to do.
Yeah, Suzanne, thank you for that question. I think it's a great question. We absolutely are doing things to drive awareness of Novavax and our vaccine. You know, I think it takes a couple of forms. One, I think it's the importance, as we're talking about today, of making sure that people go and get vaccinated, right? And we also know that having a choice in vaccine platforms and options will actually drive the behavior that we want to see, which is ultimately to get as many people vaccinated as possible. You know, specifically, we have research that shows that 25 to 30% of people are looking specifically for a protein-based non-mRNA option. And so the crux, I think, of all of the advertising and awareness that we're going to be doing is educating people that they now have a choice, that the choice is made by Novavax, and driving people to go to their pharmacies and healthcare provider offices to ask for that choice by name. So you'll see a lot of that in the form of advertising as well as public relations things, like talking to you all today, making sure that we get the word out and people know that we're authorized and will soon be available in the coming days.
Thank you, Suzanne. Members of the media, the Novavax press release is on the chat. Questions regarding this topic, please raise your hand. Heather Curtis, WMAL Radio. Good afternoon, Heather.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Great. So I have two separate questions. I'm wondering, and this may be something better suited for the county executive, will this have some sort of economic boom for the local economy, since this is something that's right in our backyard?
I don't think they have to scale up. I think they're prepared. They're prepared to do this, already have vaccines ready. So I don't know if it's an immediate boost, but it certainly contributes to the health of the company. This is, one of the major products they were getting out. They actually, I think, had delayed doing some other work in order to make sure they got this vaccine out to the public. So I think it's overall healthy for us. And of course, any success story in the biotech industry becomes good for the industry as a whole. I mean, one of my great frustrations is, in doing some of the work we do, is that people don't have an appreciation for what we as human beings are capable of doing. And if there's any industry in this country that, on a regular basis is demonstrating the ability to change life outcomes and improve quality of life for people, it's this industry. And, I take a lot of comfort and get a lot of hope out of what this industry is able to do, because I think it's a demonstration of what human beings are able to do. And I just wish more people looked at this and thought about it, and maybe got a little less pessimistic about, we can't solve any of this, but actually realize if we put our minds to it, we can solve a lot of things. Biotech industry is just the most foremost example of that right now.
And one
Mark,
more question. Yep,
I
I'm sorry.
would add to that, Heather, if you don't mind. I think, Mark, first of all, I love how you just described that, and thank you for categorizing the effort that way. I think, Heather, we have added hundreds of jobs as we have scaled up for this opportunity. And so we have transformed ourselves 3 years ago, a small company of about, 150 people, to now, almost 2,000 people doing this incredible work. I think we have a bright future for us at Novavax right now, very focused on getting our COVID vaccine, out into the market and demonstrating success. We have a rich pipeline, including a COVID influenza combination vaccine, which many people view as the holy grail, right? Instead of going to the pharmacy or your doctor to have to get 2 separate shots, you eventually will be able to get one. And as we continue to do that, that'll allow us to continue to bring in innovation and jobs into Montgomery County.
And Sylvia, those 2,000 people, are those all people who work in Montgomery County?
We actually have people deployed all over the world. We have a lot of employees, and the vast majority of our employees in the United States are here at our Maryland headquarters. We also, because we're a global company and we have agreements and contracts with governments and countries around the world, we do have some employees in Europe. But I would say the bulk of our employees, and certainly our clinical development staff, are here in the Montgomery County area.
Do you have any idea how many jobs you have added in Montgomery County since you started working on this?
I think we can get back to you on that. I know it is safe to say hundreds of them, but we can get back to you, Heather, with some specifics on that.
Thank you. And one more thing, if you don't mind, for Sylvia and for you and the county executive, there have been some people who've been very hesitant of getting the mRNA vaccine. Do you think that this will increase the number of vaccinated people in our county, since some people have been saying, well, the protein-based vaccine doesn't seem as scary to them, or they seem more receptive to that than the mRNA vaccine?
Look, I'm certainly hoping that's true. I mean, this has been our concern, because if people refuse to take the mRNA vaccine, we've got this constant pool of people who aren't protected and who can get sick, and who can, in the worst cases, they get sicker than vaccinated people. So the advantage of the vaccines is, even if you do get a COVID case, they tend to be mild cases. So if we could knock down the circulation of the worst cases of COVID, that would be a good thing. It would take stress off some of our facilities, it would put less people at risk. I think it would just kind of level the playing field for everybody. I mean, like I said, didn't agree with people's logic for not taking an mRNA, but at the end of the day, all it really matters is that everybody gets vaccinated. And this opens the path to everybody getting vaccinated. And so I'm hoping that, you know, what you said is what happens here. More people come in, they get these shots, we get even higher levels of resistance in the community to COVID, and we all wind up better for that.
And we do have research, as I mentioned earlier, Heather, that 25 to 30% of people say they're looking for a protein-based option. We think that's going to translate into exactly what you and Mark are saying, which is encouraging more people to get vaccinated who may, for whatever reason, have been hesitant to do so before.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, County Executive.
Thank you, Heather. Scott Broom?
Sure. My primary questions are off topic, but with respect to Ms. Taylor's time, if you can come back to me on those, I do have a question on this, on the vaccine, and that is the protein-based vaccines. Are the developers able to flex more quickly with variants on this side of the business as opposed to the RMA or whatever it's described as? How does that work? Are you all quicker at adapting, or about the same, or slower?
So I think, I'm less, I think, able to be comparative. I don't know what the mRNA process is. What I can tell you is that we expect that COVID variants will continue to rise. And as a result, every year we're probably going to need new vaccines for COVID. So we saw that for this season, XBB lineage vaccines. We said we need about 3 to 6 months, which is incredibly impressive when you think of needing 3 to 6 months to create and then manufacture and then get to market a vaccine. And that's exactly what we've done this season. So in June, the strain was picked for the coming season. And here we are in October, millions of doses already in to date, millions more to come into the United States, and also being authorized and recommended for use. So we're ready to go in a very, very quick amount of time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Scott. Members of the media, any more questions regarding Novavax and the vaccine? Raise your hand. No more questions regarding this topic. Well, thank you, Ms. Taylor, for joining us this afternoon. And if you need to go, thank you for being here today, Mr. County Executive.
I will do that. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much for joining us. It's really helpful.
Thank you again, Mark. Sure.
So just, somebody mentioned people we know getting COVID. It's ironic that you should bring that up. As I said, I'm going to go spending today and tomorrow visiting solid waste facilities out here. Our new Department of Environmental Protection director was supposed to fly out this morning and meet me here, and we were going to do the tour together and meet these companies, and he got COVID, and so I'm doing this on my own, but it'll be fine. But it's just, an example of COVID still continues to interfere in the normal process of things, and I'm firsthand witnessing it right now. So in other news, this week we had a big announcement from another of our big biotech companies, Deca Biosciences. The CEO announced that they're issuing a 20 million Series B2 round of funding to help advance the immunology therapy through clinical trial processes, and that's the key to getting anything to a market, is getting through the clinical trials. Deca was founded here in Montgomery County. It had some support from local mentors. They were able to move into Montgomery County Incubator in Germantown, and soon they're going to be graduating to new commercial lab space here in the county. This is one of the most important things that the county has to focus on, is making sure we have enough lab space and that we have enough incubators in the county to help companies grow. A lot of these things start with very early stages without a lot of need for expensive equipment. I know of a company in Frederick that followed that model, and then as they developed their processes, they need larger spaces and more equipment. And so I'm really excited that this company is graduating to new commercial lab space. That's going to be a big deal and a good sign for their future direction. And life sciences biotech businesses' success like Novavax and DECA are reasons why our region climbed from 4th to 3rd largest life science cluster in the nation. That's not a small thing, folks. It's also why we're working with our university system to create the University of Maryland's Institute for Health Computing at the North Bethesda Metro Station. We're the only cluster in the nation's top 10 clusters that's not anchored by graduate level research. And this was, an effort that we reached an agreement with the University of Maryland to start bringing that research into the county. The Institute for Health Computing is a critical part of our plan to create a biotech infrastructure here that will continue to foster expansion and attraction of new companies, along with efforts to grow a larger and more skilled workforce that's going to be needed for this endeavor. As we look around, one of the things we're doing now, meeting with companies in the sector and looking at other centers around the country and identifying, what we have and what things we're missing that other places have. We want to make sure that we put together all the pieces of what would be, a premier life sciences center by making sure we have the lab space, we've got training facilities, that we can ensure a company, if they come here, they'll find a workforce and they'll find the kind of technology they need to grow. So this is really important for us. So I will say finally that it was good news that the University of Maryland Board of Regents approved funding for leasing office space in North Bethesda. The Institute for Health Computing is going to start in about 27,000 square feet, I think, on Executive Boulevard. They'll be in that space. They'll be bringing in their equipment it's October, so they should be doing it now. And we're looking forward to them launching as soon as the equipment's up, running, and tested. And that'll keep them until working with the state and the University of Maryland system. We build a facility on the metro station. We know WMATA would like it to be a signature institution on the metro station. I think it's a perfect institution to be on top of the metro station. So I'm really excited about the direction we're moving in. In August, our unemployment rate was just 1.6%. So it's a 1/10% increase from our historic unemployment lows in June and July. So now we've got 3 months in a row of 1.5, 1.5, 1.6. And we've done that even as the number of job vacancies, number of job offerings are increasing, which means we're probably getting a pretty fair absorption right now. The national unemployment rate for August is 3.8. It's more than twice as high as our number. Fairfax was 2.6, Arlington 2.1, and the district was 5.0. So our unemployment rates are really strong. Our life science is interesting to help drive our low unemployment numbers, but it's also in recovery, in line with recovery in hospitality industries. I know that, we've basically recovered. We have as many or more restaurants as we had before COVID, and of course, as many or more liquor licenses as we had before. So, the county is continuing to invest, promote, and help our companies grow here and thrive. We've got a plan for how we're going to grow our biotech sector, and we're beginning to get nibbles from companies that are high tech but not in biotech, who have approached us about possible projects in the county. So when we have things to announce, we will. But it's an exciting change. I mean, to be seen more and more as a place to come to, and have an industry that gets national attention front and center, helps create the kind of image we want to create around the county. So for me, this is really gratifying to see this happening. And speaking of employment efforts, our county government, like everybody else in the region, suffered from major job loss during COVID. We had a combination of people deciding they just didn't want to work anymore. They were ready to retire. Sometimes they were ready to change jobs because the jobs they were doing were very stressful, and COVID probably made them more stressful. And, in some cases, we didn't fill jobs that were vacant during COVID if we know we couldn't put people on the front lines. So we intentionally allowed vacancies to stack up because we were not opening offices. For example, we weren't bringing people back into libraries. It didn't make sense to increase staffing for people who would never go to work. So our efforts to increase staffing kind of went along with our ability to reopen more and more of the county government and bring people back to work. And I guess everybody probably worked in similar parameters. At any rate, we're being aggressive about trying to fill these positions. Yesterday, we held another successful career fair and expo in Silver Spring. It's our second attempt this year to fill vacant new positions the county has. We're doing things differently than we have done before. We are doing some interviews on the spot. Everyone was there and considered among the best candidates for a job will be contacted within the next 30 days. We are trying to end the persistent problem of taking months to get people hired here. So we've been working with our HR people to simplify our processes and make it much simpler to get a job in Montgomery County. It doesn't do us any good when we get good candidates, but if you can't onboard them in less than 6 months, there's no way they're waiting around for that job to open up. So we're improving all the processes around hiring here so we can hire people more nimbly and we can make sure people will go back. We can get people back to work and we can get departments more fully staffed. This event we had 1,000 people pre-registered. And so we were at capacity. Montgomery County government offers a lot of different career paths and a lot of, I think, pretty incredible career opportunities. And we're committed to providing our employees a work environment that values their talents, fosters their professional growth. And the average Montgomery County employee has worked for the county for over a decade, which is over twice as long as the average U.S. worker. Our goal is to create a culture where employees will want to spend their careers working for our residents, visitors, and businesses. And if anyone missed this week's opportunity, I encourage them to visit work4mcg.com. And 4 is the number 4. Work4mcg.com. At that website, they can stay up to date on the next career fair and hiring expo. They can get career resources and explore our pay and benefit options. Before we talk about our weekly health report, I wanted to let everyone know that our new climate change officer, Sarah Kogel-Smucker, started work in our office last week. Sarah joins our team after leading the creation of the Climate Change Division in the District of Columbia's Office of the People's Council. She has more than 15 years of experience in environmental issues. Prior to her work in the district, she served as senior counsel for the New York City Law Department's Environmental Division. In this role, she advocated for the deployment of affordable clean energy initiatives, analyzed environmental legislation, and advised other divisions on climate policy. And I'm really glad to see her come on board. She shares a passion for involving the community, and that's one thing that COVID kind of took the wind out of the sails was, we had this great climate committee. We had a lot of plans for using that community out in the public to educate people. And then along came COVID and things got put on hiatus. It's time to revitalize that aspect of our work. In fact, that may be the most important aspect of our work. I think I've talked to you and you've all seen the video I did about some of the things I did at my house. The best ambassadors for making improvements in your house's energy infrastructure or in the private sector are examples of people who've already done it. And somebody a business that can say, I did this, it not only improved my energy efficiency, but it reduced my costs. Those are the kind of examples and stories we need to get out there. Probably far more effective than me just telling you we all ought to do this stuff. Matters when people see other people doing it. Our goals are pretty aggressive. I think everybody knows that. 80% by 2027, 100% reduction of greenhouse gases by 2035. I know this timeline is a decade sooner than the state's greenhouse gas emission goal, but I know that Governor Moore is moving to accelerate. I know that these aggressive targets are truly aggressive, but the intention in setting the goals, and I was on the council when we set these goals, was to ensure that we never stop trying to solve this enormously dangerous problem. Setting modest goals might have led to, victory dances, but would have left an awful lot of work undone. And we wanted to make sure we weren't doing victory dances while the place is burning down around us. So we're continuing to pursue the goals as aggressively as we can. And the government can't act alone. Without the public making choices to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions in their own lives, no changes that the government makes will be sufficient in and of themselves to achieve our climate goals. If this were just a game, losing it wouldn't be such a big deal. You know, you don't achieve your goals, that happens, that's life. But climate change is a big deal. I mean, you can see it all around you pretty much every day. Everywhere, nowhere is this heading in the right direction. There aren't like good climate changes happening now. Pretty much everything you read about is bad. The projections are worse than they've ever been, and on a shorter time frame than they've ever been. And I think most people are aware that something is changing, and the change is not for good. So we know the county is not going to solve these issues on our own. We're not going to pretend to be the saviors of the world, but we can be a leader and we can be a model for other jurisdictions. And Sarah's work is going to be an important part of these efforts. And I look forward to having Sarah on this briefing after she gets a few weeks here under her belt. Now, in the world of COVID, we're seeing a slight decline in cases. The COVID hospitalization rate has been about steady. In order to keep our COVID rates and especially hospitalizations to a minimum, we have to continue to promote and encourage boosters. The new vaccines are widely available. You just heard about Novavax's new addition to this collection of vaccines, and it'll be in pharmacies and through doctors' offices everywhere. It's still going to take some time to schedule an appointment, so please be patient. The county is not getting the kind of mass doses. The state is no longer, and the federal government is no longer relying on government to be the distributor of vaccines. So we've moved out of the role we had during COVID, but we're continuing to work with the state, our libraries, and other departments to get new supplies of rapid test kits and masks out to places where they're easily accessible. But I also encourage you to order new test kits through the government. The federal government will deliver 4 test kits per address if you sign up online. So for more on our health report, I'd like to welcome Emergency Preparedness Manager Sean O'Donnell to break down the numbers. And hello, Sean, it's yours.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. So to begin with, wanted to share, as we talk about where our numbers are going, we have seen a gradual decline in our case rates. And when we look at what the variants are, we've seen that for about 2 months now. There's been lots of these XBB subvariants that have been part of transmission, and with so many different subvariants contributing, it was a slow rise during this wave. It will likely be a slow come down as well as these continue to circulate. The one of note, these are national typing numbers. HV.1, we're starting to see that grow a little bit more nationally. So again, it has, none of this has fueled a sharp increase. It looks like the immunity gained from previous XBB, Omicron type infections and vaccinations has helped. And again, the current vaccine, the newer formulation 2023, 2024 vaccine should be effective against these types of variants. We're looking again at our state test positivity. We've seen that be fairly level for a while, with just a little bit of positivity coming down. You can see I've highlighted Montgomery County there. So not a huge amount of change. You can see here, these are our case rates from the PCR testing, and that, well, the amplitudes don't compare to previous waves because of far fewer PCR tests. You can see that we've had a gradually declining number of positive PCRs. So that's encouraging that we may be coming out of this wave. But again, I'll show you some data in a few minutes that indicates we may have just a level of COVID that persists throughout this fall-winter period. Again, going into a little more detail with our hospital numbers. I'm sorry, you can see these are our local hospital numbers. These have remained relatively consistent over the last last few weeks after an increase about a month or so ago. These have gone up and down a little bit, but no drastic changes at the state level. You can see week to week, not a large change in those numbers. Again, this is much more modest number of hospitalizations than we've had from our previous waves, as you can see right here. Again, these are the state numbers. Looking at our own emergency department volume. So when individuals go to an emergency department and don't become an inpatient, they're often discharged with specific diagnoses. We capture these for COVID. That's the top lines based on ages. You can see most of those are coming down. A little bit of activity with our seniors still. Again, that's the highest sensitivity to COVID. And then you can see we're tracking on influenza and RSV on the lower charts, and we've seen a little bit of activity recently, but they've not increased significantly yet. That's likely going to happen, though. We anticipate over the next month or so. Total ED volume has not changed notably. And then this is the chart I wanted to mention. This is all the U.S. Emergency department visits, or at least the ones that were captured and reported to CDC. And the green line is the COVID ED discharge diagnoses. You can see across the U.S. that the most recent peak there, as far as amplitude, is not too far off of what we saw last winter. You can see last fall from 10-1 on the far left of our chart, we had a sort of an elevated baseline of COVID all the way through October, November, and then in December and January, it really went up. We're starting at a lower peak for our summer here. You can also see last year, the influenza in blue, the RSV in purple, how they impacted our emergency department visits. And again, it's hard to predict the amplitude of influenza illnesses and transmissions. And we expect a little bit less on the RSV front this year. But this is why we recommend everyone to get their seasonal flu shot, to get their updated COVID booster, and if they're eligible, to get their RSV shot. We want to try to prevent as many serious illnesses as possible. And then just to share the last data point, here is the state's overall vaccination rates for influenza from the previous year cycle. And while Montgomery County and Howard County do better in relation, we see it's still less than half of the residents are getting their flu shot. So we'd like to see that higher, the same with COVID. Nothing has changed here. There's lots of resources for test kits, for masks and for vaccines, and we encourage people to reach out. We know we've had some calls from people who have had some challenges with their providers not having vaccine yet. It does sound like it's getting better. More and more of it's rolling out. So please try back and have some patience. I know it can take a little while for this rollout to happen, but there should be vaccine for everyone. And we encourage people to get their shots before they start doing family gatherings. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues, Dr. Davis, our health officer, or Dr. Bridgers, our director, to see if they have any additional HHS updates.
Nothing for me, Mr. O'Donnell. Ready for Q&A.
Nothing for me either, thanks.
Dr. Stoddard, any opening remarks?
We're good. We can proceed to questions.
Okay, let's take some questions. Scott Room, WSA 9.
Okay, thanks. I'm glad we have our HHS infrastructure here, because this crosses over some. We have what families view as a critical crisis with this assisted living and memory care place in Silver Spring, called the Landing of Silver Spring, announcing that it's been sold and it's going to close. The state is telling us a 45 days notice is all that's required, and there are very few other protections in the regs and COMAR as I've read them. There seems to be maybe a discrepancy. Federal regs under CMS seem to say 60 days, but my reporting is not mature on that. I'm not really sure what reg applies. The bottom line is we got 53 people in memory care with very short notice, according to families, who are going to have to go someplace else. And they view that as life-threatening in some cases to people whose stability really matters to their overall health and well-being. My question to you is, from what we know about this so far, do you agree with some of these family members who feel like the protections for their elders are just shockingly inadequate in a circumstance like this? You have any thoughts about it you can share?
Yeah, look, my experiences are anecdotal, but I know that, people I know who've had to deal with this say it's not easy to find memory care in the first place. And it's a lot of work to find the right facility and a facility you can afford. So a lot of different things come into play. And the people who are getting the care are often not able to, evaluate the decisions themselves. They're in memory care. So it's a disability in their ability to, handle this. And I worry about it. I think it's going to, be hard for some people. This company has no need to give them a 45-day notice to start, to evict. They certainly could have run this out another month if they needed to make sure everybody gets taken care of properly. I'm just, this is all about their bottom line dollar. And it's kind of sad that you're going to put these people at risk because they have no patience to start their project, which will ultimately boot all these people out anyway. But to not take into consideration how do you do this in a way that's humane for everybody is a bit alarming. But
Omega Healthcare's website reports that they have 88,000 beds in 42 states and 2 countries, and that their real estate holdings are $10.3 billion.
Yep.
And I suspect, although I don't know, Mr. County Executive, that perhaps some of your county services may be called upon, even though state regulations and I guess federal regulations are really the issue here. Can you assure residents that the county may be able to step in to assist in a crisis if they can't find a place that's adequate to send their elders, or what are your thoughts?
So, we do crisis housing, but we don't often do it typically for people, who have care needs. I mean, that's not the kind of stuff that normally comes across our table. Somebody gets evicted, they don't have money to pay rent, they know they've got to move. This is a whole other, angle. I'll defer to, Dr. Bridges or Dr. Davis. We'll certainly do everything we can, but we're certainly not equipped to handle 53 people with memory care needs. That's not something the county has capacity for.
Well, perhaps, Mr. I'm sorry. Yeah, I am aware there's a long-term care ombudsman, and perhaps Dr. Bridger or.
Sure, Scott.
Thank you.
So we've had conversations yesterday. We were advised of the 2 p.m. Deadline mandate yesterday. Our aging and disability chief, Dr. McGee, has had multiple conversations with the Office of Healthcare Quality and the state of Maryland to look at any additional courses of actions or remedy to support this community. We're having conversations now about any additional services, either in our services to end and prevent homelessness or other spaces as part of a crisis management. So, Scott, we are in contact with the state and we're looking at the resources available within HHS, as Mr. County Executive Elrich indicated, to see how we can support this challenge. But again, the Maryland Department of Healthcare, Office of Healthcare Quality, has taken the lead for many of these challenges that we have. We no longer in the Department of Health and Human Services have the licensing or regulatory status of managing or monitoring challenges in this instance, or in these instances, I should say. So it's a way of advocating for the need, but also looking at what the Department of Health and Human Services and the county is able to provide in relief and or support. But those conversations are ongoing as we speak this afternoon.
I see Tom's here. He obviously has some questions, but let me just ask one more thing. And it is that I read the COMAR. I'm obviously not an expert on this, but the family's point of view is that these shortcomings and protections for their elders are shocking. There
Yep.
appears to be nothing in Comar that says that this organization says they have to help find new places. It doesn't say they have to. And it doesn't say at the end of 45 days that they have to continue to care for people in the circumstance where maybe they've got no place to go. And these family members are just beside themselves because of that. Would anybody at the table agree with them and perhaps advocate that since this is a Comar state law issue, that perhaps our legislators take this on in circumstances like this to provide more protection?
I'll certainly raise that. And, hopefully our legislators will in fact, our staff should make sure our legislators get briefed on what's happening so they've got a context for why we would be asking for changes. But there's got to be a longer run up than 45 days. And, it's just, you pointed out how much wealth these guys have. It's just stunning that they could do this to people, and it's of no concern to them. Must be nice to live in that bubble.
Okay, thanks for the questions. Tom, good to see you.
Thanks, Scott. Hello, Tom Fitzgerald, Fox 5 DC. Good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon, County Executive. You're in San Francisco, as you said today, and it's a question about our changing government in a virtual age right now. You're able to do this briefing right now. We
Yep.
wouldn't have been able to do this 10 years ago. And the question is about how much public engagement in person do lawmakers need to be making? Recently, the Prince George's County Council actually went back to allowing members to attend meetings and vote virtually. The Montgomery County Council does do virtual attendance themselves. There have been some questions in the District of Columbia. You were on the county council for a long time. You do these virtual briefings for us in the media, and they're very helpful for us as we cover these stories. But I know you do a lot of in-person stuff because that's how you talk to people. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, as a public official, where do you put the proper role of virtual attendance, whether it helps the public or hurts them in some way? And what's the balance?
So it's a really good question. And I think you kind of you alluded to a line that I think makes sense. I do this every week, but I'm not making a decision off of this, right? And my job is I come on, I tell you what we're doing, and you ask me questions. You never have to submit a question in advance. No one's screening your question. So this is a pretty free-flowing back and forth. And if you're sitting in a legislative setting, though, where you're actually decision-making, I think it's useful to see people. I think expecting everybody to get on Zoom calls and functions is wrong. And so, I thought when, the park and planning did Thrive on Zoom was a joke. There's no way that's the same thing. And nor did they allow the same amount of time for comments that they normally would have. I think there's a tendency in general for people to shrink the comment periods, which is also really hard. I mean, I was, my history of activism goes before I was ever elected. When somebody tells you you've got 2 minutes to explain your position, you might as well just say, thank you for your time. That was interesting. You can't lay out arguments in 2 minutes and 3 minutes. And so I think we've moved away from being willing to engage people. And I always tell people, I started in Tacoma Park Council. We had meetings routinely that went to 1 o'clock in the morning, and we let people talk. And I think letting people talk is a good thing. You don't always agree with them, but I think people need to be part of the process. And I think we do less and less that's legitimate parts of the process. We've gone from, even as I would look at, park and planning charades, which are charrettes, as they call them. It's like, it's minimal involvement. People don't know where the involvement's going. People throw stickies up on a wall, and then they never know what happens to the stickies. I'm a big believer in more engagement from people and more willingness to talk to people. And I don't think anybody's hurt by that. And God knows, I get battered sometimes by people who don't agree with me, but it is what it is. And it's what you've got to be willing to do. If I wanted to do a job, I'd have done something else.
Thank you, Tom. Members of the media, any more questions for the county executive and or the officials? Okay, I see Jeannie Bixby, Local 360. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Lorna. Thank you.
Hey, Jeannie.
Hi, Mark. I'm kind of switching gears here. But I wanted to ask you, Councilmember Jawando just put out a statement about a letter, an opinion from the Maryland Attorney General on the STEP Act that Jawando has put forward, essentially stating that parts of the act are not in accordance with state law. And I assume you maybe haven't read it. This all came out during this briefing, so I don't expect you to know everything that's said, but I just wanted to get your perspective kind of on this issue and parts of the act not being in accordance with state law.
So I don't think large parts of the act are in accordance with state law. I'm not averse to some things in state law changing. I mean, there are a list of things we've talked about wishing we could do that we can't do unless state law is changed. I'd like to be able to do more traffic enforcement, particularly for repair orders, where you can just take a picture of a car with a light out or no tail light over the license and, you know, send the person an automated ticket rather than having to pull the person over. I'd rather the people who read meters be able to go down a street and look for and run license plates and look for stolen cars, which they can't do because they're not linked into the system. So I think there's some things we could do that would help make people safer and, you know, and also minimize contacts. I get the issue about police contacts. I think people just don't understand the history of police relations and community relations in this country. I mean, I don't think Montgomery County is the Montgomery County of 30 and 40 years ago, and I don't think our police are the police officers of 40 years ago. But there are a lot of communities, their memories are long, and police were not considered friendly, and nor were they considered neutral. And, you know, there are all too many examples in, you know, American history, our own history of police acting out of line. And so it leads to a level of distrust in the community. And it's really hard just to get up there and say, oh, that's over now, everything's fine, because everything's not fine. So I think there's, you know, I understand concerns about stops. Like I said, we'll work with the state legislature to try to, you know, bring as many of those things into a situation where you're not required to do a stop. But I have no qualms about stopping people for speeding, reckless driving, running stop signs, running stoplights, license. You know, we can have a debate about how late a registration can be. But I think there's a point at which, you know, a week or a month is one thing, 6 months, a year is another thing. I'm not fully comfortable with the STEP Act as it was introduced. But I do think there are things in there worth our trying to figure out what we can do with the state to implement some of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ginny. Athena Matthew, ABC7, good afternoon.
Hi, Mr. County Executive. I have a question in reference to the Charter House apartment building in Silver Spring.
Yes. Yep.
2 of the 3 elevators are out of service, and many of the seniors that live there use walkers and wheelchairs, and they say using stairs are not an option. Montgomery County has previously provided funding for this building. So what can you do, and what will you do to keep to do for these seniors?
Well, you know, I just got briefed on this again, but I got to say the Charter House has had a long history of this. And the problem we run into, we were running into it on another building. We can go out and cite these people till we're blue in the face, and it's just the cost of business to them. And when they go to court, too often the judges will say, you know, after they are able to delay court proceedings sometimes for months, if they finally go in and fix something the day before you wind up in front of the judge says it's fixed, there's no fine. And it doesn't take into account the pain and suffering the tenants go through while they're waiting to get things fixed. So we're looking at some other tools. I'm not going to discuss them in detail right now, but the county's got to be able to act in the case of buildings where people are being put at risk. And I consider elevators, kind of a life safety issue, and particularly in a senior building. So, the fact that they don't feel compelled to repair things quickly, the fact that they haven't dealt with rodent infestations and some of the other problems in the building is a real problem. But we are struggling, and it's not because our inspectors don't go out and inspect. It's because landlords refuse to repair things in the timeframes they're given, and they're able to get a pass in the courts if we take them to courts. And so the system, as usual, is stacked in favor of the wrong people, instead of making sure people have get just outcomes for the circumstances they have to endure. So we are looking, and we'll probably bringing to the council some ways of strengthening what we can do so that people can't simply flout the law. We have a tenant right to repair, but it's very hard for tenants to, find a plumber, you get somebody to come in, then have to pay the plumbing bill, and then tell the landlord that I'm deducting the bill from your rent. It puts them, I think, in a difficult situation. We're working on ways to strengthen that, and what role can we give the county in that? Because this has just gone on. There are too many people who do this. Not all landlords do it. I'm not saying that every landlord, is running their buildings down or failing to maintain them, but the ones that are, and there are people who do this, are frequent flyers, and they're frequently bad, and they're frequently tardy in making repairs. And we will work to change that.
Thank you so much. And going off of that, the landing of Silver Spring was sold and tenants will be evicted. Is your office doing anything to help these residents as well?
This is the memory care. Yeah, we talked about that earlier. I mean, our folks are, in contact. We're trying to figure out what kind of support we can give. As I said earlier, there's no way the county is equipped to provide memory care to 53 people. So, this is not something the county can assume, but we're going to help with relocation efforts. And, I will support legislation at the state level to give people a longer warning time. I mean, there's no urgency. It's not like this place is closing down because it's been condemned and it must be torn down. It's being closed because the people want to renovate it and then put it back in the market. That's great for them, but the cost to these people is going to be enormous, and it's not easy to find empty slots. Affordability is a big issue. You might find slots, but if you've ever looked at what some of these memory care places charge, it's certainly not for anybody who's not solidly middle class or upper middle class. When you're talking thousands of dollars a month, more than typical rents, this is not an easy thing for people to get into in the first place.
Got it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Athena. Members of the media, any more questions for the county executive and or government officials? No more questions? Going once? Twice? Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Stay safe. Have a great one. See you next time.
Thank you all. Bye.